the folks who kind of put this formula together were less disliking Africans, but more worrying about how they could take care of themselves, where their labor force was going to come from, how were they going to be able to afford to be able to make a living for themselves, et cetera. And I think as time went on, the experiment, so to speak, from their perspective, became something that gave them a buzz that was a little bit different than just the one that they wanted. It all of a sudden started giving them kind of a feeling of well-being, that there will always be people to take care of them, that they could always feel good about themselves because there was somebody that they could feel better than. We dropped that scenario inside of a disaster event called Katrina. And then we have a city who then has all of that coming to play. And so you have people and their lives not being valued sufficiently enough for our government to manage to get it together enough, to go to the extent that is necessary enough to be able to manage to take care of people. And so you have people to lose their lives, their property. You have people to have humanity compromised to a level that it never should occur here in America.
Coming out of Katrina, where it became apparent, not just to ourselves, but looking through the lens that the rest of the country put on New Orleans, about it was so obvious what the racial issues were and are everywhere. But this was unavoidable. You could not avoid talking about it. And it was such a big part of the recovery, and still is. The racial divide is what's determining who's returning, who's going to school, whose children are being raised here.
Despite all of the conversations that people might have about whether or not people are choosing not to step out of the past and whether or not race and racism is really at work, you know, you get a moment in time in a city where no one is almost willing to argue with you that racism is alive and well. You have the opportunity to just savor that moment and go on, or you have the opportunity to grab the moment and try to get something more out of it. And I think that that's what we did with Truth Be Told, is that we saw that there was a moment, and we saw that the world of the cultural and the creative would be major influences inside of being able to make progress there. Moving a conversation from being a conversation among same people looking or same people thinking, to being a conversation that could be had between people who were different. The ideas about how to accomplish that in a way that would send nobody running away from it, but would have everybody kind of being curious and peeking and kind of saying, well, I can manage to go and sit down and look at a little theater about race and racism, and having artists that could be talented enough and committed enough to the possibility of the world being better and different, to be able to be the authors of the work, so that they're not just looking for the opportunity to be able to punch folks in the stomach with the fact that, you know, you are racist, you've been racist, you know, your life is built on racism, but to use this as an opportunity, the learning and teachable moment.
This process and this project for the people involved will carry on from here, whether or not we're meeting together from here on out or not. I think it's affected everybody's life.
We didn't think that this was going to be something that was going to all of a sudden undo all of this history. You can't work on problems between people unless you talk about it. And that we were in a city where we did not talk about race. We, for the most part, fussed about it, we fought about it, but we didn't talk about it. We didn't agree that the problem existed and try to figure out how to be able to get out of it. And so Truth Be Told was about trying to be able to seek those moments when people could really do more than just fight about race.
So it's probably going to take a while to work through all this stuff. But the longer we don't do it, the more difficult and longer the course is going to be to deal with it.
As time has gone on, we've stopped doing the work. And so with the work not happening, then people can use this distance of, you know, what percentage of people are at or below the poverty level, what percentage of people don't graduate from school, what percentage, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, all of that's great and wonderful, but all of that stuff is really related to a history that had people not being educated. The issue is, how do we create a future that moves us away from that? A future that works for everybody. And so we're hoping that Truth Be Told helps people to realize that this doesn't have to be one of the things that you assign to the world of impossibility.
I think for many of us, this Truth Be Told project was the first time we were able to engage in a real conversation about race with people of the opposite race. So it was meaningful on a lot of different levels. It was painful, it was fun, it was difficult.
We can know everything that there is on the landscape of knowledge about race, racism, the demographics of people, their achievement, absence of it, etc. The fact of the matter is all of that is essentially crippled in the face of a real story that happened to a real person.
Truth Be Told is meant to inspire conversation in our community.
You don't have to negotiate it, debate it, you just have to better understand it. That's what you get to do. That is the thing that really steps us outside of our protective zone and really gets us into the place where we're walking a minute inside of somebody else's shoes. And then once you do that, then it's the issue of how would I feel if that happened to me?
People love to tell stories to each other. And more important than that, they love to hear stories told.
Once you hear a piece of somebody's story, they become very real to us.
Whoever said that every time that there's a disagreement, that somebody's got to lose? Perhaps we both win and we both lose. And it feels better because nobody's got more than the other.
Everybody who has participated in a story circle has, of course, gone through their own memory lane about incidents and impressions that shaped their racial view.
Truth Be Told, in a very simple way, is just reminding us of what life could be like if it worked out that we let our humanity show and that we didn't judge so quickly, and if we didn't shut the door on communications just because it started to get uncomfortable. We should talk about race and racism like we talk about the education system being bad. We ought to talk about social justice like we talk about not having health care. You know, we really shouldn't have a list that talks about housing, health care, and education and not have social justice be something that's a part of it as well. So Truth Be Told is hoping that the people who become involved with it, and I know for the first play that we had, the one called Story Circle, you know, I think that we were pushing somewhere between 500 and 600 people who got to see that piece between readings and performances. And so if all of those people were willing to just remember that and have that be something that's with them when they're sitting in their community meetings, and when people are talking about issues that are all around the issue of social justice and all around the issue of the matter of race and racism, and they're willing to be able to raise their hand and say, well, like, what are we going to do about, you know, this matter, the racism issue? Now, what are we going to do about that? That they are as comfortable asking that as they would be comfortable saying, I don't want to have bad dogs on the street because we have too many kids in our neighborhood, you know, and have it be okay that 85% of the people are sitting and looking at them in a certain kind of way, knowing that there are other people who'd be willing to stand with them and keep that conversation going. We're trying to find a way to be able to have it be made part of the mix.